Welcome to the New Warehouse Podcast, the podcast for those that are curious about what's possible inside their four walls. Before we get into this episode, let's hear a word from our sponsors that make this all possible. Ready to modernize your operations? It's time to partner with Peak Technologies. As North America and Europe's largest system integrator, Peak delivers end-to-end digital supply chain and enterprise mobility solutions across warehousing, logistics, and manufacturing. With over 40 years of expertise, they design, deploy, and manage the technology that modernizes your facilities, driving measurable operational performance. As a premier Zebra Technologies partner, Peak combines deep AI DC expertise with industry-leading devices, machine vision, and automation to deliver scalable, future-ready solutions. Trust Peak Technologies to power your digital transformation and head to peaktech.com. That's peaktech.com. Are you looking to grow sales this year? Strategic Marketing Communications can help you do that. For more than a decade, Master Plans Communications, Marketing, and PR has been building awareness and creating demand for material handling companies. MPC offers strategic marketing and PR planning, media relations, video productions, photography, websites, digital marketing, social media, and more. Connect with MPC at masterplancommunications.com and on LinkedIn. If you enjoyed this podcast and are looking for more content around warehouse automation, then check out TGW Logistics' new podcast, The Automation Journey. TGW is a customer-first, holistic warehouse automation company, and they understand that every journey of exploring, implementing, and maintaining automation looks different. In their podcast, they touch on all different topics and questions you may be facing right now. Whether you're brand new to automation or a seasoned vet, find the automation journey today on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. As we all know, in most yard operations, technology isn't the problem. Execution is. The workforce turns over faster than processes can stabilize. Outsourced vendors manage tasks, not outcomes. Costs rise while service levels slip. Safety issues are a constant, and leadership still lacks a clear, consistent view of yard performance across the network. Yard management systems were supposed to bring control, but the truth is that software alone can't enforce process discipline, develop labor, or manage equipment day to day. That's why many enterprise shippers are shifting to YMX Logistics. YMX Logistics is a national third-party logistics provider focused exclusively on yard operations. YMX manages yards as an operating system, aligning people, processes, equipment, safety, sustainability, and technology into an integrated operation. So, if you are interested in learning how you can optimize your operations while improving sustainability and lowering your total operating costs, visit ymxlogistics.com/next. That's ymxlogistics.com/next. Thank you to our sponsors, and now let's get to the podcast.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast, and on today's episode, we have a returning guest that's going to give us the scoop on everything 2026 in supply chain. And if you don't know him, he is one of the first, maybe the first consultant focused on warehousing. I think he shared with us in the world on our last episode. He is Jim Tompkins, and he is the chairman at Tompkins Ventures and Tompkins Solutions now. And we're going to dive into what he sees coming in 2026, his reflections on 2025, and also how he ended up back at Tompkins Solutions. Because the last time we talked to him, he told us why he wasn't at Tompkins Solutions anymore, and he was focused on Tompkins Ventures. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll also talk a little bit about kind of opportunity and strategy for 2026 to really get you started for the year, and how to handle this year after some of the uncertainty in 2025. So, Jim, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you. How are you today?
Thank you, Kevin. I'm well, and look forward to the difficult questions you put forth. You sent me a list of questions, and I got a headache just thinking about them. But I look forward to seeing what I'm going to say. You never know.
I don't know. I got to start sending my guests some Advil maybe or something for the headaches there. But it's
absolutely, yeah.
It's great to get you back on here, and we're really looking forward to hearing some of your answers to those questions and some of your insights too, as we always value those. And so, for people maybe that are not familiar, I know in the last episode we kind of really dove into a lot of your history in supply chain and this world in general. But just give us kind of a brief overview of Tompkins Ventures and Tompkins Solutions and what they're all about.
Well, one of the first men in warehousing education, in 1975, I taught a 2-day warehousing seminar called Planning and Managing Warehouse Operations. And I'm convinced that it was the best warehousing course in the world. And the reason I'm convinced it was the best warehousing course in the world, it was the only warehousing course in the world. No one else could possibly imagine of doing that. I had people call me up and say, what are you going to do? Teach people how to put the wrong stuff in boxes, or teach them how to smash boxes, or what are you going to do? And so it was a really interesting start. And so that was very early on. That was 1975. PWO, Planning and Managing Warehouse Operations, we called it. And it was a really interesting start. And from that course in 1975, taught it first at NC State, second at Old Dominion, third at University of Tennessee, fourth at Virginia Tech, and fifth at University of South Carolina. So I live in Raleigh, and I kind of surrounded myself. And as I taught this warehousing seminar, people asked me to do warehouse consulting work. And so we started a little consulting firm, and that firm was called Tompkins Associates in 1975. And by 1980, I had left the university, became full-time at Tompkins Associates, and we started doing work in Brazil and in Mexico and Canada and the UK. And so we changed the name to Tompkins International. The word associates didn't translate well overseas. It sounded like it was just a bunch of folks that were kind of thrown together, not real employees working at a firm. So we changed the name to Tompkins International. In addition to doing warehousing work, we actually did logistics work. So we included transportation, we included inventory, network design, as well as the technologies related to that, the WMS, the TMS, the planning modules, and so forth. So that was in year 2000. Then we added material handling integration. In 2005, we went from being a logistics firm to being an end-to-end supply chain consulting and implementation firm. In 2015, we started Tompkins Robotics. So we split Tompkins International into Tompkins Robotics and Tompkins Solutions. In 2019, we were one of the largest logistics supply chain consulting firms in the world. And so we were tremendously successful, and things were just really going well. And then what followed 2019 was 2020, which of course was COVID. And COVID just knocked us out of the box. I mean, we were really lost a lot of work as a result of cancellations related to COVID. And I had spent, 40 years building this firm. I wasn't about to watch it go downhill. And so I did the brave thing. I retired. And so I retired. I'd made enough money and I was old enough. So I retired in 2020. Unfortunately, I wasn't very good at that retirement stuff. I only stayed retired for a couple months. And I went back and I returned to the roots of warehousing. and 3PL and inventory and transportation, and started a firm called Tompkins Ventures. Now, the difference in 2020 as opposed to 1975, we did consulting in that space. In 2020 at Tompkins Ventures, what we did was matchmaking. And we found somebody had a problem, we found someone else had a solution, and we put them together. And so we didn't do the work ourselves, we were matchmakers. And that business, Tompkins Ventures, started in logistics, went to finance, went to technology, went to procurement, went to organizational development. And so we established an ecosystem of people looking for problems and people providing solutions. And we built a matchmaking network that we had over 250 business partners, is what we have today. And we're in 61 countries around the world. So we have 250 business partners that are looking for folks who have problems. And then we have a series of what we call CPs that solve the problem. CP is commercial partner, CP is a capital partner, and CP is a consulting partner. So we play matchmaker between the CP and the client that has the problem. They work on the problem, they solve the problem. So we're not selling consulting studies. What we're selling is results. And so we get results. Tompkins Ventures only gets paid when there is results. And so what we found is we have a business at Tompkins Ventures, which is very low. It's a light asset light business. At Tompkins Ventures, we have more capability than McKinsey, Accenture, and IBM combined, but we only have 3 full-time people. Because what we've done is we've not hired the people. What we've done is we've created partnerships. And so the ecosystem has the solution providing capability. And so Tompkins Ventures is asset light and recurring revenue, as opposed to Tompkins International and Tompkins Associates and Tompkins Solutions are asset heavy, lots of consultants, and it's project based. So I went from asset heavy project based to asset light recurring revenue. So it's actually a superior model. But then what happened in 2025, Tompkins Solutions came back and said, would you rejoin us? And what I did is I looked at that and I said, boy, that makes sense. And so we took Tompkins Solutions and Tompkins Ventures and we put them together. And so now we have the opportunity to do matchmaking with Tompkins Solutions. And so it's kind of an interesting evolution that I had never predicted, but that's what we have. So kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And it, it was very interesting to hear how you made your way back to Tompkins Solutions, right? Because I think the last time we spoke, you were talking about how you came out of Tompkins Solutions and then Tompkins Ventures. Yeah.
I like that, Kevin. However, what you just said is back to. Okay. And that's a little bit difficult because we didn't. So I didn't think about going back to Tompkins Solutions. They actually approached me. They came to me and said, Jim, we're a new private equity company. We have bought Tompkins Solutions, and we would like you to be our chairman. I said, wow. I said, tell me about yourself. So I learned about the private equity. They were cool. They had hired a new group of leadership, and they were very cool. They told me about their vision for the company, and I said, wow, this is really interesting. I like what you're doing here. And they said, well, would you be the chairman of it? I said, well, let's talk about that. We negotiated for a little bit. And after that, we said, yeah, let's do that. And they said, it's great to have you back. Same word you used. I said, no, I'm not coming back. I'm coming forward. Because I left the firm in 2020, and by 2025, Tompkins Solutions was around 2022. They were 3 years behind when I got back at 2025. And so I said, we're not going back, we're going forward. And so now what we're doing with strong leadership, with strong private equity support, with me as chairman, what we're doing is we are going forward. And so in the few months since we began working together in August, we now are up to around 2025. And as we get into next year in 2026, what we're going to do is we're going to find ourselves being in 27 and 28. And because we're pursuing a whole new range of solutions we're providing by having Tompkins Solutions and Tompkins Ventures working together. And so it's really, really cool to see ventures and solutions working on problems together, each relying on their strength. And so we're not going back, though. We're going forward.
Going forward. Got it. I like that. I like that mindset. Definitely. I think that makes sense. And, it's very interesting to hear how they're coming together, the ventures and solutions. And I think it's based on what you said, right? I mean, it sounds like a good match to make that happen. And how do you expand that ecosystem and grow that ecosystem entirely? So very interesting there. And I'll say, I guess I would say welcome forward to Tompkins Solutions, right?
Oh, man.
I guess I would say.
I love it.
So great to hear about that, and obviously, always really enjoy hearing about kind of your experiences and history within the industry too. And I got to say, you're definitely right that you're not good at the retirement thing. It sounds like. So obviously, you have your kind of pulse on the industry and what's happening in the market. And the last time we spoke, right, we talked a lot about tariffs and what could potentially happen within the supply chain this year, and how is that going to change things a little bit. So now we're kind of at the end of 2025 here as we're recording this, right, already here in December. And if we're looking back on the year, right, I mean, how would you sum up the year? I mean, is it close to what you were thinking was going to kind of unfold, a little bit different? What are your thoughts there?
Well, in one word, it's been crazy. I mean,
Sure.
it's been anybody who predicted exactly what was going to happen is either a liar or has been drunk for the year, because my goodness sakes, it's just been all over the place. In February and March, we kind of got a glimpse of what was coming, but we still weren't ready for Liberation Day. On April 2nd, 2025, Trump just knocked us for a loop, and we all came away confused and uncertain. All sorts of stuff was going on, as what's going to happen. And so we really, really didn't know. And so from April 2nd, 2025 until all the way into November, it was chaos. It was chaos. Starting in November of 25 and going through December and now early January, we're starting to see some of the chaos settling down. Of course, there was some positive thinking throughout the year as deals got done. And then there was some negative thinking as deals got undone.
Sure.
And, you'd get excited about one thing. Say, we nailed the UK. And then the UK changed their mind. And so Trump decided to put some more tariffs on. And so we don't know where we are and we don't know what we're going to do. And so understanding how President Trump negotiates was really useful to us, because as you understand how he negotiates, you understand it is going to be a roller coaster. And in fact, we had 1 year of a roller coaster. And so it's been up and down, up and down, up and down. And I anticipated that we would, kind of steady state out. But to be perfectly honest, I thought it would happen quicker than it has. The issue of quickness has to do with the subject of tariffs. When we began back in February and March, it was clear that we were talking about trade. And so the economic tariffs were really, really what we were talking about. But what came true on Liberation Day is that there was another factor here. And that other factor were political factors, which resulted in what I call strategic tariffs. And so they weren't predictable based on economics. Brazil, we had a positive balance of trade with, and therefore you would expect a negative tariff. But in fact, Brazil got one of the highest tariffs because President Trump had a problem with a political issue in Brazil. And so there's a combination of strategic issues, which are political, and then these economic issues, which are trade. And so that confused things. And the drug wars and the fighting wars and immigration, semiconductors and rare earth minerals all came into play. And that resulted in a lot of confusion. Now, the interesting thing, as we talked about last year, is that I felt the bottom line was going to be that we would have tariffs ranging around 10%, and that would be where we would be. But we had at one point, 153% tariff with China and,
Yeah.
and things like that, which are ridiculous. I mean, you're never going to collect 153% tariff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even a logical thing. That's like me saying, well, I'm going to lose some weight. I'm thinking about losing 600 pounds. Well,
Yeah.
I don't weigh 600 pounds, so how can I lose 600 pounds? I mean,
Sure.
so how can you charge 153% tariff? It doesn't make sense. But guess what? As we exit 2025 and enter 2026, you know what the overall tariff is across the board for the United States? We've put about a 10% tariff on.
Yeah.
So we are kind of where we thought we would be, but goodness sakes, we thought we would be done with this by now.
Mhm.
And the fact of the matter is the churn continues to take place. And so where we're ultimately going to wind up, you really, really don't know. And so we kind of guessed where the bottom line would be, but we didn't guess the timing, and we still are not done as we go into 26. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this evolves from here. But 2025, yeah, we pretty well understood, but man, we had a lot of fits and fats and bumps in the road, and it was really crazy, and lots and lots and lots of uncertainty.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if I had any word that I think was resonated and I heard the most in 2025 was probably uncertainty, what you said there at the end. And I think it's very interesting to see. And obviously, as you mentioned, a lot of, in some instances, a little unpredictable, right? And when you look at these tariffs from economic standpoint versus a political standpoint, right? Like some of this political stuff too seems a little unpredictable as well, right? We don't know, and all of a sudden, I think the most recent, right, is some tariff threats against Venezuela, right, and everything that's going on there too. So really, obviously hard to navigate for businesses that are impacted by these decisions and changes. So if you think about 2025 from a business perspective, right? I guess obviously hindsight is 2020, but if you look back, like what was the best strategy to have to navigate this uncertainty?
Yeah, I think there's probably four things that we really learned throughout the year. And if you would have asked me in February, I would have given you one answer. And if you asked me in May, I'd give you another one in June. So it's good to ask me when the year is over, because now I'm pretty clear what a good strategy is. And this has been evolving over the year. But the four things that I really think are foundational that if you were really smart, you would have done for the whole year, and hopefully you got with these four things sometimes during the year. The first one is be proactive. Unfortunately, most people did the opposite. They were like deer with headlights, and they just sat there frozen. And so they were not proactive. And what they saw was chaos. And so they didn't know what to do. So they did nothing. I think a leading strategy for 2025 is, even though there is chaos, and there was, we still need to do something. And so be proactive. And companies that had a good strategy went out and found ways to grow market share. Now, maybe the profitability percentage, their margin went down, but they were still profitable, and they grew market share. So they did things that allowed them to do that. Being proactive, I think, is number one on the list. The second strategy that I think is extremely important that we learn and we carry into 26 is resilience. Resilience is the ability to bounce. And so when you get hit, how do you respond? And what we found is that people needed to have plans on how to respond. And so what was a leading strategy, as well as being proactive, was saying, okay, what can happen? these tariffs can happen, these tariffs can happen, these tariffs can happen. And if these different scenarios take place, what should we have done? What should we be doing? And it's by doing scenario planning and having a plan in place. And then when the tariff jumped out from behind the rock, you said, oh, I have a strategy for that. And so I was ready to respond. And so I knew, even though I was uncertain what the scenarios would be, I had a plan independent of what scenario occurred. And that was a winning strategy. The third thing that occurred was a little bit disheartening for guys like myself. I'm a bachelor's, master's, and PhD in industrial engineering.
Sure.
And what industrial engineers like to do is optimize solutions. And so I wanted to optimize everything and on multiple options that can be deployed depending upon what tariffs occur. So optionality would be the third strategy I would plan for in 25. And then the fourth strategy I would plan on, and so what we have is we have being proactive, we have working on resilience, having optionality, and then the last strategy I had for 25 is to be innovative. You need to think outside of the box. You need to challenge the status quo. This is how we've always done it, but what are we going to do now? What is some breakthrough thinking? What are the competitors doing? What are people in other industries doing? So what can we do differently to allow us to deal with these uncertainties and this chaos that's happening? So best strategies for 25 were being proactive, focusing on resilience, embracing optionality, and thinking outside the box. Those are the four things that I'd recommend. And what's most important, and that's why I like your question, it's important that we carry these forward into 26 and going forward, because we're going to have some of the same challenges going forward that we've had in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those are all really great points around the strategy. And I think, it's even interesting as you mentioned around Tompkins solution, right? You joined forward this year and you said, still like it was 2022, but we're in 2025. So I think that's good to put into any company, right? To say like, okay, well, how do we take these things? How do we be proactive? How do we have options, right? How do we have contingency in place? Because we don't know what's going to happen, right? And we need to be able to think differently around that, like you said, outside of the box. And I'm curious, did you see any company or any strategy where somebody was thinking outside the box this year that really kind of stuck out to you as an example of doing something a little differently than normal?
Well, yeah, I think there's several things that took place that were repeatable, and you saw them in several opportunities. The first is diversification of the supply chain and diversification of sourcing. And so shifting your production out of China and going into Vietnam, shifting it out of China and going near shore to the United States. Maybe you took it to Mexico. Maybe you took it to Costa Rica. Maybe you took it to Dominican Republic. Maybe you reshored to the U.S. and you brought it back to the U.S. And so what happened is companies that did this, they gained resilience because now they had more control. They had reduced exposure to tariff spikes, and that allowed them to have a better planning horizon. So I think supply chain diversification is one kind of example that we can look at. A second one is, as I mentioned earlier, scenario planning, and that you have a variety of outcomes that may occur with tariffs, which might make, oh, wow, we can't afford to buy this product from this country anymore because of the tariffs that have been built. And so let's look at where we might want to do it later. So you don't actually go and diversify, but you plan to diversify and you look at how that might take place. The third is to negotiate. Go to the people that are producing the product in China and say, hey, we've got a 25% tariff here. I can eat 12 if you can eat 12. Can we split this somehow? Yeah. Can maybe you eat 10, I eat 10, and let's get our shipping company to eat 5, because if we don't buy from you, you've lost it out, I've lost it out, and the shipping company is going to lose out. So what can we do to gain some stability by us negotiating to work together with these tariffs? And so instead of eating a 25% tariff, I only have to eat 10. Well, that's something I maybe can live with. And so how can we do that in the short term? And then how can we do that for the long term?
Sure.
Are there some discounts or some standards that we can kind of base this on? If the tariff turns out to be 50%, here's what we're going to do. If it turns out to be 40%, here's what we're going to do. And how do we negotiate that in a different position? And then how can we use innovation to do things differently? Maybe what we're going to do is we can't match the labor costs that were coming out of Asia, but maybe what we do is invest in automation. Maybe we invest in intra-logistics, and maybe we invest in domestic production. And so what we do is we see companies doing things with respect to workforce development as well, maybe using AI to reduce the labor content that we have, using other technology to create value from a local point of view. And so I think the real opportunity is not trying to predict what the tariff outcomes will be, but instead to build adaptive capacity. How do we get adaptive capacity? So if this happens, we can do this, and if this happens, we can do that. If we can do that by being innovative and negotiating and repositioning ourselves, I think we can get around the uncertainty and we can buy ourselves a path forward. Interestingly, my last book is called Insightful Leadership.
Oh.
And Insightful Leadership was written to help people understand how they should have responded in COVID. Well, guess what? COVID was just a practice run for tariffs.
Sure.
Okay. And so we had the opportunity. So this book, I wrote it on how to respond to COVID, but it didn't come out until COVID was kind of dwindling. But now the book has real validity with respect to how to deal with tariffs. And the subtitle of the book says, Surfing the Waves to Organizational Excellence. And how do you surf the waves? Well, if I'm trying to surf into the screen, when I'm on my surfboard out in the water, I'm not looking at the shore.
Sure.
I'm looking over my shoulder at the waves. And I say, Kevin, you see that wave coming?
Yeah.
That's not going to be a good ride because it's breaking way down the beach. See the next one? No power. See that third wave? Kevin, look at the third wave. It's huge and it's rolling and it's coming right towards me. And so I know the way to get a good ride is to get that third wave. As the third wave approaches, what do? I got to paddle. Why? Because I got to get in front of the wave. If I get behind the wave's going to take me out and I'm going to wind up eating sand when I wipe out.
Yeah.
But if I can get in front of that wave, the power of that wave's going to go and zap. I mean, even me, my hair is going to blow. I mean, I don't have many hairs to blow anymore, but my hair is going to blow and I'm going to wind up at a great ride because I anticipated the wave. And so that's what we need to do is we need to be in a position to anticipate the wave. And that's what's going to allow us to really be successful in the opportunities of dealing with this uncertainty.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the analogy there. Very interesting. And definitely, I think that's a great way to look at things. And I love actually how you've kind of tied that into, what happened during COVID. And this is, potentially a bigger wave, right, that is going to continue, it seems, for some time, at least a little bit, right? And looking back at that and seeing like what's coming versus like, this wave is crashing right on top of me at this moment. Now I got to like react and do something, right? So being proactive in that, I think it's very interesting to see. So we've kind of reflected on 2025 here a little bit, right? And we're coming right into the beginning of 2026. And so what do you think is going to happen in 2026? What are some of your predictions around, this year we're looking at in front of us?
Well, I know what everyone wants me to say. Everyone wants me to say, Kevin, 26 is going to get back to normal and it's going to be smooth sailing. Sure, and it's not going to be a problem. Unfortunately, that's not true. That would be a fib. That would be absolutely harmful. 2026 is not going to put uncertainty behind us. And not anyone, not me, not you, not President Trump. Nobody knows what's going to happen in 2026. I mean, the churn is going to continue. Tariff policy is going to continue to be all over the place, and it won't settle in. We're not going to have a predictable pattern, and we're going to have a lot of surprises. Specifically, I see 4 things happening. Okay. Number 1, frequent announcements and reversals. And so the government's going to come out and say, we got this new tariff that's going to happen, and it's going to affect on April 4th. On April 3rd, they're going to come out and say, oh, that tariff's been delayed until June 15th. Sure. Then that's been delayed now until August 9th. And so it's going to come, it's not, it's going to come, it's not. And so it's going to go back and forth, and it's going to apply 3 months from now. It's not, it's going to apply 3 months from now. And there's going to be an issue of policy whiplash. And this policy whiplash isn't because Washington, D.C. has lost its mind. It's because stuff is happening. You know, where are we going to be on the Ukrainian war? Where are we going to be on the rare earth minerals? Where are we going to be on protecting the farmers? You know, all these things, as they change, we're going to have change in policy, and that's going to cause this continuous churn. Now, something that is going to be interesting is not very helpful with respect to this churn, but something that's going to be interesting. The churn is going to be less across the board in 26 than it was in 25, but it's going to be more industry specific. And so we're going to see there's certain industries that really come to the forefront and then disappear. Obviously, electric vehicles are going to be very volatile in 26. Semiconductors, steel, batteries, all these things are going to be things that are going to go up and down and up and down. What's soybeans going to do? What's this going to do? What should the farmers plant? It's crazy. You don't know. And so different sectors are going to be impacted with sudden inclusion and then exclusion from. So this day it says this does not include steel, and 3 days from now it says yes, it does include steel. Well, it just includes steel if it came from this country, but not from this country. And so the complexity is going to be great, and our ability to predict it is going to be less and less accurate over time. Then there's the issue of that we already talked about, the economic tariffs versus the political tariffs. It seems like economic tariffs in 25 was the name of the game. Political tariffs are going to be even more important in 26 as some of these issues continue to roll forward. The economic tariffs are going to have some stability to them, but the political tariffs are going to have less stability to them, as we're able to see that the tariffs are an effective way of getting people to do things what you want. The economic tariffs related to trade tend to be relatively black and white, somewhat predictable at this point, but the political tariffs are absolutely positively gray. Sure. They someplace between white and black, which often means gray, but you're going to get flicks of white and you're going to get flicks of black in there, and then lots of gray, lots of unpredictability, very difficult to grasp. And then the fourth prediction I'm making is we're going to find some short-term political timelines. We're going to find that the midterm election is going to be important. And so there's going to be things that are done just because of the midterm elections. There's going to be geopolitical tensions that come about. Iran does something that we don't agree with, and this is going to happen. Venezuela does this, and then this is going to happen. Argentina does this, Brazil does this, India does this, Russia does this. All sorts of things all over the place is going to take place. And these things are going to make the political issues much more volatile and much more reactive than anything we've seen before. I think the bottom line here is that tariff churn isn't about one policy. It's about living in a world where trade rules are written in pencil, not ink. And so what we find, in fact, sometimes some people, I was talking about that with one guy, and a guy says, I think they're written in ink, but it's invisible ink. If the ink sits there for a day and then it disappears and you come back and there's nothing there anymore, well, that's even worse than pencil, I think. Yeah. And so it's clear in 2026, the tariff instability is going to continue, and there are going to be all sorts of issues which are going to affect us. Being proactive, being resilient, having optionality, and working on innovation are still going to continue to be important. And we need to really double down on that. If we didn't do it in 25, we got to do it twice as hard in 26, because the opportunities, being proactive, resilient, optionality, and innovation is really where the answer to this lies. And companies that do those things well are going to come out of this ahead, and the companies that don't do it well are going to come out behind. And so we need to decide which pile do we want to be in as we get 2026 underway.
Yeah, and I think very interesting points there, and I love the written in pencil instead of ink, because it does seem, I think this year especially we had certainly some moments where people were like, oh my God, like that's crazy, we're freaking out about this, and then all of a sudden it was like, no, actually that's not what we're going to do, right? We're going to change it, and that in itself becomes hard to handle and navigate as well. So very interesting perspective there on kind of what's potentially going to be happening in 2026, and from a company perspective and a company supply chain perspective, right? I mean, what should, aside from the plan that you said already about being proactive and having optionality and thinking outside the box, I mean, what is the one thing maybe that these companies should be focused on the most, right? Or like, where should they be putting most of their attention to be able to just handle some of this?
Yeah, that's a difficult one, because there's so many companies that find themselves in different positions. And so instead of giving you one thing, I'm going to give you 6 things, and then companies have to figure out which of those things apply to them, because disruption is the new normal. And as disruptions occur, for political reasons or for economic reasons, there's different ramifications. So one of the things that needs to be done in 26, if it wasn't done well in 25, is we have to de-tariff the redesign of our products. So what can we do to de-tariff? What can we do to shift classifications? What can we do to shift country of origin? And if the biggest winner there is reshore. You bring the product back to the U.S., you don't have to deal with tariffs. Now, there's some other issues there with respect to labor availability and labor cost and so forth. But looking at how do we de-tariff our products? What do we do to get our products independent of what they do in Washington, D.C.? The second thing is something we mentioned already, but it's taking on a whole new inference, is reglobalization. Reglobalization of nearshoring, friendshoring, and reshoring need to continue to be investigated. I think that a lot of people kind of pulled the Mexican lever because it was one that we had pulled before and it kind of had worked. But even Mexico was uncertain, and that, in April, we need to have an agreement on the USMCA that goes in effect in July. And so that's going to occur relatively quickly, and the progress on that is kind of spotty. So maybe we need to nearshore someplace other than Mexico. Maybe take something to Panama. Maybe take it to the Dominican Republic. Maybe go something in Puerto Rico. And how do we do those things? So reglobalization is one of the 6. Number 3 is one supplier negotiation. We need to look at having tough talks with our suppliers. Some companies are assuming they need to absorb this on their own, and I don't think that's related. I think we need to have some index-based or tariff adjustment clauses in our contracts. I think we need to avoid sourcing paralysis. I think sourcing paralysis is a real, it's like hardening of the arteries. It will kill you. It's not something that is going to go away. And so we need to make sure that we keep active in making things happen. We don't just wait and see. I think that's going to drive the 5th thing I put on the list, which is elevate procurement. Procurement for way too long has been viewed as a back office function.
Sure.
And procurement needs to come out of the shadows, and we need a procurement renaissance. And I can really relate to that because this is very much related to supply chain with COVID.
Yeah.
Before COVID, supply chain was kind of those guys back there. I'm not sure what they do, but there's a lot of activity back there.
Yeah.
Well, COVID, because it was our fault, you couldn't buy beer and toilet paper. All of a sudden, supply chain became the name of the game, and we got a lot of supply chain representation on the board. We got the C-suite, and so we really made progress. We need to do the same now with procurement. Procurement is not about saving cost, although that's one of the things it does. It really has much more to do about adding value. And we need to have the procurement mentality in the boardroom, in the C-suite, and we need to allow the procurement to guide enterprise decisions. And so if you're a chief procurement officer or you're a VP of procurement, you need to sharpen your sword because we really, really, really need procurement to step forward and work on what is the strategy for procurement. How does procurement affect resilience? How does procurement affect optionality? It's not about finding the low cost country. It's about finding the countries that are going to allow us to meet the demands without having disruption in our service. And then what can we do that's innovative from a procurement point of view? So I think procurement is going to be a big one to look at. And then probably the largest of all I save for last is the whole technology thing, be it AI or other digital tools. We need to have digital tools that give us the visibility, the automation, the ability to model risk. We need AI forecasting. We need AI-driven trade optimization. We need AI worker development. We need AI everything we do in the company, and it's a great opportunity. We need to have blockchain-based compliance tracking. We need to have digital twins that we can use to monitor tariff exposure. We need to have digital twins that allow us to have a virtual reality to do true modeling of what different outcomes could be and how we can act differently within our operations to make sure that we have a greater control over what's happening and less and less and less uncertainty. So these are the six things that really stand out in my mind that we need to get more creative on. We did a little in 25, but this is kind of the real objective of 26, is make these six things really sing for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think great tips there and advice and certainly interesting on the procurement side, because I can see, that procurement, especially when it comes to sourcing. And I love that you said, it's not just about the lowest cost supplier, right? It's very much a strategic move, right? On who are you going to work with. And that's going to play into, I think, a lot of the other parts that you mentioned too, right? Around, resiliency, optionality, and, those types of things. Like, how can we strategically source and be able to make sure we're protected in a way, and we don't necessarily fall into that gray area that you were talking about earlier, and giving that procurement a little more shine, right, than just thinking of them as the people that order your Post-its for your office, right, or something like that. So I think that it's really interesting to see that. Now, if we look kind of long term, right? So we've talked about kind of this year reflection a little bit, and how to look at 2026, and now, long term, I mean, what do you think are going to be some of like the impacts here, and how should we think about, this tariff kind of uncertainty world that we're in now, and environment? I mean, how will that look, at the end of this administration, I guess, in the next 3 years to 5 years, what do you think the long-term impact will be there?
This one, boy, you need to double my salary, Kevin, on this one, because I thought, boy, that's a really good question. I wish I had thought of that on my own, because that's really digging deep. I mean, it's, we all went off and got the COVID vaccination, but now we got all these football players dying from heart attacks, and we're saying, was that COVID, or this happens or that happens? And, we really don't know. And so kind of doing the same thing, we're, second guessing on COVID. What's going to be the second guessing on this tariff stuff? What are the long-term impacts of this uncertainty, and what structural shifts has this resulted in the supply chain? I think are are really, really important. I came up with 5 things, and then I can expand on this to a whole nother list, but I'll just keep it to the 5 for our discussion here. But first thing is supply chain resilience becomes permanent. I think companies diversifying their sourcing and building regional trading networks to reduce exposures is something that's going to be here for the long term. One of the things that Trump is doing is he's really working on this hemisphere. Someone says, why is he so hung up on Venezuela? Well, he's not hung up on Venezuela, in my opinion. He's hung up on China and Russia, and China and Russia impacting Venezuela, and therefore he's hung up on Venezuela. But it's really a China-Russian thing that's taking place there. And so we need to understand that has to do with the long-term resilience. And so creating localized, multi-node supply chains that maybe are less efficient than the ones we had before all this started, but less efficient that doesn't deliver is not less cost. It's a problem. And so what we need to do is realize that resilience is going to stay with us for the long term. The second thing is the one that you pointed out, even as you asked the question, is the procurement renaissance. This is going to have a long-term impact, and it's going to upgrade procurement in organization, and that's not going to go away in 2027 or 2028. The boards are going to be shocked that the procurement people can do something. I think a challenge we have is when you read a LinkedIn profile from a chief procurement officer.
Sure.
He says, worked at this company and saved 18% of the direct cost and 9% of indirect. And then worked here and saved 3% and 4%. It saved this, saved this, saved that. Where's the value add? And so I want to take those procurement cost saving guys and throw them out the window. And I want to know where are the procurement guys that are going to really add value to my ability to make things happen. And procurement is going to continue to be a competitive differentiator, and there's going to be a lot of proactive investments that are going to result from the procurement renaissance that we've talked about. I think there's some issues with respect to inflation and employment and the cycles of this and the macroeconomics of it all. The San Francisco Fed did a really good job on research, and they said that tariffs initially raised unemployment and lowered inflation, but over time, unemployment normalized and inflation continues to rise. So this is the position that tariffs is a tax, and the tariff tax is going to result in inflation, and therefore things will be less affordable. Sure. Well, that's one of the outcomes, is that things become less affordable because we have higher increases in inflation. However, there's another opportunity there. And that opportunity is if the government understands that and they work on lowering taxes and they work on reducing regulations and they work on reducing energy costs. And maybe if we can reduce energy costs, taxes, and regulations to the point that is greater than the tax that came about from the tariff, maybe we're not going to have inflation. So it's clear. If all you do is tariffs, inflation is going to be there, affordability is going to be an issue. But if what you do is tariffs plus reduce taxes, plus you work on regulation, plus you reduce energy costs, we might wind up with less inflation. And so it could be a positive thing, depending upon how that goes. And so we got to watch both sides of that argument. I think what's going to happen is companies are going to open up their pocketbooks with respect to investments. Because everyone's scared to death of what's going to happen and uncertain, they don't want to invest in something that's not going to pay out. I think what they're going to find is their competition is going to invest, and they're going to be caught on the short end of the stick. And so what we need to do is we need corporate leaderships to push through long-term capital projects despite the uncertainty. Are you taking some risk? Yes. If you don't take some risk, you're going to lose. So there's risk in doing nothing, and there's risk in doing something. And I recommend taking the risk in doing something and putting the investments where you think it's best put and making that happen. Don't do nothing. That's not an option. And then I think what we're going to find is our supply chains are going to become much more regionalized and much less globalized. And what we're going to find is that by re-globalization, we're going to find that there's going to be much more dependency on our hemisphere and much greater reliance on our hemisphere. And therefore, NATO is going to become less important, but the Western Hemisphere is going to be more important to the United States. Europe is going to become more important to Europe than the United States impact on Europe. And so we got to understand those things. And these are long-term impacts that are going to come from what started in 2025 and are going to continue in 2026.
Yeah, very interesting thoughts there, and it makes a lot of sense too. Some of the things you're saying there, and I think the one interesting thing that stuck out to me is certainly making sure to continue investing. Right, doing nothing is not a strategy, and it kind of reminds me of it's almost a little bit like the stock market, investing a little bit, right? When everybody's like running away and selling off, and prices are dipping a little bit, like that's typically an opportunity to buy in a sense, right? So it's almost the same thing as continue to invest and think about what is the long term, right? Instead of just getting a little scared at the moment, and this is a little chaos, this is a little uncertainty, like hold everything, right? Stop, right? I don't think that's the right tact, because you think about your business, right? And you think about especially the where we're at in supply chain, right? So I mean, supply chain is not going anywhere, right? And hopefully your business is not going anywhere either, and you want to be here 5 years from now. So continuing to invest, I think, is a smart advice to do that and think about that. So very interesting to talk to you as always, Jim, and get some of your insights and some of tap into some of your knowledge and experience throughout the years here as well, into how we can kind of navigate some of these things. And it's certainly an exciting, well, I won't say exciting necessarily in a good way, time for supply chain, but certainly always interesting and keeping us informed and being able to react. And I think I'm curious your thoughts on this actually as we close this out. Like, if I think about COVID and I think about what's going on now around the tariffs this year and continuing into 2026 and beyond potentially, I think the one thing I see, right, I think it's almost forcing us to make our supply chain better, right? I think like prior to the pandemic, there was nothing really super disruptive, right, that had happened like that, and certainly allowed more flexibility, and like if our planning was not quite right, we'll be okay, we'll figure it out, we'll throw some stuff on a plane and fly it over, right, or something like that. And then when you come to that point, now we're seeing, I think, people being forced to just be better at supply chain. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Well, I think it's absolutely the case. I think, the whole China revolution took place because of low-cost labor. But guess what? China doesn't have low-cost labor anymore. And in fact, China has a huge labor problem in that they've got this inverted pyramid, and they've got, there's everybody's old and nobody's young because of their one-child policy.
Sure.
And now that's built into the economy. The one-child economy, one-child limit is out, but people are still averaging less than one child per married couple, and so it's a way of thinking about things that is different. And so, as China runs out of low cost labor, and in fact runs out of labor, period, what are they doing? Well, guess what? Last year they implemented 9 times more robots than the United States did. And so what they're going to have is low-cost labor, but it's going to be low-cost labor as in zero, because it's not being done by a human. It's being done by a person. So what do we do? In the United States, we're saying, well, I'm not going to invest because I'm not sure I'm going to understand. Well, they're investing like crazy in automation, and we're not. And so they're going to still have low-cost labor, but now this will be sustainable because they're not depending upon babies growing up and working in factories. They're now going to have robots working in factories, which we all know is going to be a superior solution. So, there's no rest for the weary here. We need to really realize we're in a war, and this war is economic, and we need to do things smarter by investing capital better. And the other option is not acceptable and won't work. So it's a cool time to be doing what you and I are doing, because my goodness sakes, there's so many opportunities and so much potential for us to add value that it's, let's get it on.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. Let's get it on. Yeah, definitely. So very interesting to talk to you, and really appreciate you coming back on the show and sharing your time with us and your insights, of course, too, as well. If people are interested in learning more from you or learning more about Tompkins Ventures or Tompkins Solutions, what's the best way to do that?
Well, just send me an email. I tell you, I get a lot of emails from a lot of really good people asking hard questions like you do, Kevin, and I appreciate that.
Sure.
So just write at J Tompkins, JTOMPKINS at tompkinsventures.com. And that'll get there. And you can use the Tompkins Solutions. That's J Tompkins at tompkinsinc.com. Either one works, and I answer. I'm all over both of them every day.
All right, fantastic. And we'll definitely put that in the show notes, as well as at thenewwarehouse.com. So feel free to reach out to Jim. As you see, he is full of insights and answers and advice. So make sure you get in touch with him. And thank you once again for your time on the show today, Jim.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.